Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Digital to Dice podcast. I am Dave.
I'm Ron.
And this is episode 93. Ron, what do you got?
It's the Doug Gilmour episode.
Oh, Dougie Gilmour, yeah.
Dougie Gilmour.
I was going to say Atlanta Flames. Calgary Flames. Calgary Flames, Toronto Maple Leafs. Yeah.
He's a hero in Toronto.
Yeah, he was.
Someone has to be.
I think he was, was the last guy that played with a straight stick with no curve. I think he played with a straight stick.
Didn't he score a game winner to beat the Wings in one of those, in the 93 playoffs? One of the greatest playoffs ever.
Oh, he might have. Yeah, 92-93 was fantastic. I loved him playing that there.
He was a big star for Toronto that year. So
yeah, he was. That whole Kings-Leafs series was great. And then the Kings...
So was the Red Wings-Leafs series, too.
There was a couple good ones there. So anyway, so the Dougie Gilmour episode number 93 here. Hey, ways to get a hold of us, digitaltodice.com. That's our website. 978-751-DICE is the text line. digitaltodice@yahoo.com is our email, and facebook.com/groups/digitaltodice. Join in on the conversation over there. And in episode 93, we have another great interview as we speak with Marc Unger, who is the co-creator of Thespian over on Amazon. That's one of the series over on Amazon. He's also a director, actor, writer, and comedian. And he talks about how he got started in gaming with his dad. And so for Father's Day, we thought we'd have a little father's son story here. And so we had Marc on to talk about that. So without further ado, joining us on the Dice Line is writer, director, actor, comedian, and the co-creator of Thespian, which can be seen on Amazon. Welcome to the show, Marc Unger.
Thanks for having me, guys. I love your work, and I'm really excited to be on.
Thanks for being on.
Sure.
Now, we wanted to have you on here because you got a really fun story that you emailed us a while ago about playing dice baseball with your dad and how he created a game and you played it with him there. So Ron suggested, hey, right around Father's Day, what a great story this would be to have you on the show and talk about that game there.
Sure. My sports gaming days go back, almost 45 years now, almost 50 years. And it all starts with me being about 7, maybe 8 years old, I think 7. And my parents were divorced, which was very, very rare in the early 70s. Like just divorce wasn't a thing. Now, everybody's divorced. But back then I was like the only kid in my class. And, when my dad came over we would see him every other weekend. It was like the most exciting time for me, right? So one day he comes over and we're in the living room and he starts showing me this dice baseball game that he claimed that he and his friend had created when they were in like junior high school or something back in the 50s. And it was 2 dice, and it was the most simple game in the world. It was, you roll 2 dice, you set your lineup. I remember, we looked in the Daily News and saw that the night before the Mets had played the Pirates. So, we just took the box score, the lineup. I took the Mets. He took the Pirates. And, I think I had John Matlack. In fact, I can actually see this in my head. I had John Matlack pitching. He had Dave not Dave Justy because he was a relief pitcher. Steve Blass. I'm pretty sure it was Steve Blass.
Oh, goodness.
Was his pitcher, and you write up the lineup, and then you just roll 2 dice, and a 1 and a 1 was a ground out, a 1 and 2 was a fly out or a sac fly if there was a guy on base, 3-1 was a base hit, 3-2 was a ground. I mean, I could go on and on. 5-3 was a single, 6-6 was a home run, of course. And I remember playing that game, and I just got hooked on sports games, and so then back then it was like playing dice baseball, and I would have leagues where I would keep stats. As I got a little older, and I would get Street and Smith baseball every time. I couldn't wait for the day that it came out, so I would have all the lineups that I could then use for my different leagues. I remember Manny Trio. I had like a 20 game. It was National League only, 20 game. I think it was like 77 or 78, and Manny Trio led the league in home runs, which he wasn't really a home run guy.
No,
but
wasn't.
This was strictly dice. Like it wasn't stat based. It was just a really simple thing. And then being really little, like I was keeping stats on games like, if you remember, like Bobby Hall hockey, where you had the rods, I would keep stats on those guys.
I had friends of mine that did that. They would play the rod hockey games, and they would have all this. Now, obviously, the center had the most points in the left wing, and the defense had barely had any. But I'd go over their house, and they'd be scoring goals, and they'd be writing. I go, what are you doing? It's like, we're keeping stats. It's like, you're keeping stats for a rod hockey game? Like, oh, yeah. It was serious business.
There was I remember being a little kid and playing All-Star Baseball, which was
the spinner game, Catco, right?
The spinner game that was Catco. Well, what was cool about my dad, because actually as we got older, I didn't have a very good relationship with my father at all. So all my good memories are when I was really young. And my dad, my grandfather was a sales rep for Hasbro. In fact,
rough life.
He had his own company. If you wanted a G.I. Joe on the East Coast, you had to go through my grandfather. So we had G.I. Joes in my house. Like we'd set them on fire. We would, and they're worth so much money now that we just, would drown them, would just stuff them down the toilet because they were disposable to us. But anyway, so they were in this famous building in New York called the Toy Building, which is in Gramercy Park on I want to say it's like 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue, and 25th Street. Famous building where all the toy companies were.
That's so when I would, for those who aren't familiar with New York.
Right, sorry, yeah, Manhattan, right. So, when I got to see my dad, he would take me around to all these various offices, and I would just basically get free toys and games. And one of the games we got was All-Star Baseball. We also got a game called All-American Football, and I remember it had an eagle, Philadelphia Eagle, on the cover. And I think that game became, could be wrong about this because it might have been no, that was a spinner game. But we also got Pay Dirt. So I played the game Pay Dirt way, way back when. Then there was a game by Avalon Hill, Football Strategy, which was a really cool game. And we would play that with my dad for hours and hours. And then, eventually I found my way, not to Stratomatic. I was never really a Strat guy, but to APA. I remember seeing the ad in Street and Smith and buying that.
Let me stop you on the Football Strategy thing because my father, you and I kind of have a similar story. My parents split in the fall of '76, and so I was 4. And I remember one of the games that he made her play, because I was too young, was Football Strategy. And it was, you picked an offensive card and your opponent picked a defensive card, and they overlaid, and that's how the play was resolved. And I remember
it was a very simple system, as I remember. You had off tackle, maybe line plunge. I mean, I don't want to confuse theater with Football Strategy because they were different. But Football Strategy, you didn't have separate teams.
Right. No, it was generic teams.
Yeah, there was Football Strategy. There was also Baseball Strategy.
Oh, was there?
And there was Basketball Strategy.
Okay.
They were all put out. I think they might have originally been put out by 3M, and then that was bought by.
Oh, okay. Yep.
By Avalon Hill, but I could be making that up. But I know that ultimately when I played at Avalon Hill, had all 3 of those titles.
You could buy them in Sports Illustrated. So I guess that was my I remembered that as soon as you said it. That was kind of my introduction way back in 1975 to this type of gaming. I'm not sure how much she enjoyed it, but I was too young to play against him. I'm sorry to cut you off.
That's okay. And because I have a younger brother, and he was always forced to play these games with us, and my dad and I used to just crush him repeatedly. He was always the worst of the 3 of us because he just didn't care enough. My dad and I wanted to beat the crap out of each other.
Of course.
At least in the game, not literally. Until years later. Right. But my poor brother just would get pounded and forced to play these games with us and consistently lose. To this day, my brother doesn't like me that much because I beat the crap out of him in everything from knock hockey to basket. Whatever we've slap shot hockey. I don't know if you guys ever, that was
was that like a
little toy version of.
Was that the one that you had to wind up the puck?
You had knobs,
like an air hockey, but you had to wind up the pucker. Yeah, knobs and spun.
It had knobs. It was for little kids. You didn't play that, after you were 7 years old. But even in Knock'em Sock'em Robots.
Yeah.
I would, and then my dad would bet. My dad was a degenerate gambler. In fact, he always thought it was adorable. Because another thing that we used to do, and I play the game. top of the stretch now, right? Because I think it's a cool horse racing game.
Please tell me that you didn't have a birthday party at Aqueduct or anything like that, right?
If we didn't, it is very possible my dad spent many of my birthdays at Aqueduct.
Yeah.
I might have had a party. He had his own little party, losing all my money. I mean, OTB was like, that was like my daycare center. But anyway, so what he would do is he would give me the newspaper, the race results, and I would, and this is me like 7, 8 years old, calling the races, and then just randomly picking a winner. And my dad would actually bet money on which horse would win. So my dad was such a degenerate. He would bet on horse races that A, weren't real, and B, didn't even have any there was no well, this horse is better than that horse. It moves more spaces. It was just whatever I made up in my head.
Yeah, well, that's
whenever I decided to win, place, and show. I was doing that when I was 7 years old. So that's why I became a comedian, because my childhood was ruined.
Reminds me of that scene in Vegas Vacation when Chevy Chase went into the casino and the guy's like, "Okay, guess what card I'm thinking of?" Chevy Chase is like, "Is it a queen?" Exactly nope, it's a 7. Oh, damn.
Yeah. So then APA came along, and eventually I found Strat-O-Matic. No, I'm sorry, not Strat-O-Matic. Status Pro. Which I liked a lot. And then, when I got into comedy and acting, I know some people kind of go away from these hobbies for a long period of time, and then they come back to it. Life kind of gets in the way. I was single until I was 41 or 42. So, even when I was on the road traveling doing comedy, I, could bring these games with me and kill time. When I wasn't drinking and trying to meet women,
there's a lot of downtime on tour.
Yeah. So I would play. The game I really got into at some point was Pursue the Pennant, the baseball game, which ultimately became Diamond Mind. And I still play Diamond Mind probably more than any other, any other computer sports game. And I know that Diamond Mind doesn't get the love that some of the other games do, which I don't completely understand, because I think it's a really great, very easy to play, really quick. I know, Ron, in fact, you guys, I think last week were talking about game length, right? I think.
Yeah, that was last week's show.
Yeah, so one of the things about Diamond Mine that I think is so great is you can play, a double header in 40 minutes.
Yes.
Which, it's click, 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 and the replay. It's all text-based. I mean, you got a screen and you can download pictures and stuff to kind of mod it up, but it's basically just written text. But the call of the game is really, really good in Diamond Mine.
Now, I hate to ask this because I know you're a Mets fan. We ask this to everyone that comes on the show, and we should have asked this first. If there was one game that you would want to go back to see or wish you were there for, even if it's a game that you went to. And again, as a Red Sox fan, I loathe to ask which game that might be, 6 or 7. What game would you go back to that you would want to see in person?
Game or can it be sporting event?
Sporting event.
Any sporting event.
Okay. Obviously I've been a regular listener to your show for a long time, and I've heard the other interviews. So I knew this question was coming, and I thought really hard about it. So here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to say.
You can say Game 6. I'm not going to hate you.
No. Because it's Father's Day, I'm going to pick as the biggie a father-related event.
Okay.
But I will say that the first Ali Frazier fight.
Oh, good choice.
Would have been something. That's my runner-up for now, because I really would have liked to be an adult and
71
be in that early 70s vibe and hanging out with all these, there was so much buzz.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, huge. And it was such a great battle between two really different types of boxers. And I really would have liked to be there. But I'll pick, again, because of Father's Day, as a New York Giants fan in football, it was really hard going when I was young.
Yes, as a Giants fan, I can relate.
Sucked. from the, in fact, they were so bad that I was a Jets fan when I was really young, because at least they had Joe Namath.
We're not going with Miracles in the Meadowlands here.
I was going to think, right? Yeah. So the Joe Pisarcik fumble game, is that the one you'd want to go to?
Well, yeah, I remember. I remember watching that on the black and white TV in my room, and what's the name? It was wasn't it Herman Edwards?
Yeah, it was Herman Edwards that picked it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, now I have a pronoun and a noun for you for even talking about that, but go right ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so they were bad, and then they started to get a little bit better. The last year under Ray Perkins, they made the playoffs against Dallas. 81, right? And then Parcells took over. So the game I'm going to pick is the 86. The 86 season, that Super Bowl, Denver and the Giants.
When Elway never got off the plane.
Right. And the Giants defense was just so
to a pulp.
Overwhelming.
Yeah. Absolute pulp.
Yeah.
And, I was living one place. My dad was living somewhere else. My brother was living somewhere else. So we weren't together to watch the game. But I cried. Like, I actually cried when the Giants won that Super Bowl. And in fact, just thinking about it now, I could almost cry. The emotions were so powerful. And it was like, and the first thing I did was call my dad. Like, Dad, you watch the game, And it was just like, he was practically in tears. And my dad was not like an emotional guy that way.
Right.
Isn't it amazing how
when he was hammered, he was emotional. He would sing My Way when he got drunk all the time.
Sports can be so emotional, and it can really bring people together. And that kind of like ties into what we do here with these games, is that we play these games and they're so emotional for us because they bring that emotion out when we were kids or young adults or even grown adults when it just sparks something in our past, and it's like, wow, I remember that. And that's, it's so powerful. It's a big part of our lives, what we do
Absolutely.
here.
That game, that night, was my grandfather's wake.
Really?
Yeah. And I said, I'm going to the wake, and said, no, you're watching the Super Bowl. Because I grew up a Bengals fan. The Giants thing came later because they were on every week, and the Bengals were the Bungles. But yes, and so I have very powerful memories of that game because of what was going on a few miles down the road.
Well, yeah, I mean,
that's.
I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, our lives are tied, particularly I think with our fathers, for many of us to sports and to sporting events. For me and my dad died. The Giants had beaten the Patriots in 2007, and that really surprising upset when they ruined the perfect season. Then they played them again in 2012.
Right.
Actually, I think the game was 2000.
Was after the 11 season, yeah. So
it was the 11th season, right? So my dad had a stroke, and he had a stroke the night that they won the conference championship, and he died like 2 days later. So he missed the Super Bowl. So I that's another time I cried when the Giants won that Super Bowl, because my dad wasn't. And even though by then we really weren't communicating,
right? But still,
it was still really, really hard to take because my dad had missed that game by just a few days, basically.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to bring us down, guys.
No, I think that was the whole point. I did not have a great relationship with my father, and he was a huge sports fan. And he died when he was 49 and 99. And so I never really got the chance to know him as an adult. My dad, my mom's third husband, my dad, wonderful guy, was a huge Buffalo Bills fan. And I'd have given anything for them to have won one of those.
Well, he had four tries. That's all. I mean, you did your part. You gave him 4 kicks at the cat, and he couldn't win it.
The Giants was their best hope, and it didn't happen.
The Giants was their best hope, and I'm sorry, a 47-yarder on grass is not the chip shot that they've turned that into over the years.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
And the Giants that night had the perfect game plan.
Yeah, they did.
Just don't give them the football.
Yeah.
I'm not responsible for someone that might have been absolutely hammered at halftime versus both the Cowboy games in my living room as an adult. I'm not taking any credit or blame for any of that.
The worst blow wasn't the Redskins. Wasn't that the biggest blow?
No. It was the first game against Dallas in Pasadena.
Oh yeah, that was bad.
Was like 51-14 or something. That was the Leon Lett game. Leon Lett, it would have been more, but Tasker ran him down.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I think Mom drove Dad home that night.
That was a tough one. Yeah.
But yeah, but no, I get it. I certainly get that.
So you started playing. Your dad introduced you to these games here, and that kind of got the itch going. And you played some of the games, and you had the tie-in with your grandfather there as well, and you played through. So you're still playing games now, right? And do you still get that same enjoyment out of playing the games?
Of course. I mean, that's why I do it. I like to get lost in them. I like, I love the what if. I've always been a big kind of fan and student of history. And I like doing things like fighting, and I use the game title bout. Now I use the computer game title bout too, Muhammad Ali and Jack Johnson, or, Joe Frazier and Gentleman Jim Corbett. The fact that you can do that and, get fairly to really accurate results. And it's not just rolling random dice. There's method behind the madness and the numbers and all of that is really, really cool. I don't know if you guys remember, this is many, many years ago. Somebody did like a computer simulation on television.
Yeah.
Of Muhammad Ali and Rocky Marciano. Yeah. And I remember watching that as a kid and just thinking that the ability to do that was just like the coolest thing in the world. And so all these what if scenarios that you can play out in sports. I just recently finished replaying the Mets 73 season, which is kind of the first season that I really remember, when they lost to the A's in the World Series. And it was really fun to play the season out. Unfortunately, the Mets ended up losing in my replay. They were in first place like pretty much the whole season, and then they tanked it at the end.
I was about to think that would have been a tough one to recreate because there were 85 and how many did they win?
I want to say they were 82 and 80.
Okay, yeah.
Something like that.
And the Cardinals and the Pirates were pretty close too, right? That was
right. I mean, actually, all the teams. I think the basement team. I don't remember if it was. I think it might have been the Expos. Were like 6 games out or something like that. I mean, it was really, really tight. But it was just it was a division of mediocrity. So
Correct.
The way my replay played out was sort of the opposite of what actually happened, because in real life, the Mets kind of came on strong in September.
You gotta believe.
And that's how they won the division. In my replay, it was sort of the opposite. They were ahead by as much as like 10 games.
Really?
Yeah. And then ultimately, didn't have the enough in the gas tank to finish it out. But it's great to do that stuff,
Hey, when you were out on the road and you were playing some of these games in your downtime there, did anybody ever walk in while you were playing one of these games and you try to explain what you were doing to them?
That is a really great question. And
the reason I ask is because it's almost like I don't want to say it's a niche thing we do, but it's almost a niche thing that we do because it's not as big as video games. It's kind of what I'm getting at, and it's not as big as everybody watches Game of Thrones. Like what we do here as a community, play cards and dice games or PC sim games. It's a smaller group of people, and sometimes it's hard to explain. Like, what are you doing? Sometimes my friends, hey, what was that game you were playing the other day? You were playing the '88 Bruins. Oh yeah, and I try to explain it to them. So you ever run into that?
Well, I definitely remember, when I was playing cards and dice games before we had the opportunity or the ability to play the computer games. I do remember, like, guys on the road asking me what I'm doing, but it was really easy to explain. And most of them, quite frankly, they had at least heard of, like, Stratomatic or, they were somewhat familiar with the world. So I didn't have, like, anybody looking at me like, are you an alien? Is there something, emotionally unhealthy about you? I had girlfriends that, I had to kind of go deeper in explaining to them why I was getting enjoyment out of this. They just thought I was nuts. Okay, you keep rolling dice, honey. Go ahead. But my wife, she totally gets it,
Yeah, I'm lucky in that respect too. She just doesn't really care. Yeah, whatever keeps you out of trouble, honey. Leave me alone.
Ron's wife is really lucky because on her anniversary, Ron gets to some really good seasons for Action PC Baseball.
And she doesn't even use them. It's great.
Yeah, she doesn't use them all the time. She's like, Ron, if you want to use the season here, go ahead. Okay, if you're not using it.
It's not true at all, but...
All right, so you're doing the cards and dice thing. You do with your dad. You're still playing nowadays here, and again, our dads are real important. Especially as young kids with sports. Because I know my dad got me into Bobby Orr and the Bruins. Being up here in Boston, and in fact, I had a picture just come up on my Facebook feed today of I had a huge regulation size net in our living room, and there was a picture of me, my dad, and my mom when I was 5, I think, and we would play inside of the huge net in the living room. It was kind of funny.
Really?
Yeah. No, it wasn't there all the time, but we'd bring it in the rain or something like that and play like that. So I remember, all that stuff with the hockey. And that's why I'm the hockey guy, because he grew up with the Orr era and he got me into hockey. We had a long driveway as a kid. We lived on a house that had a long driveway with fences on both sides. So we had almost a built-in hockey rink. So we had boards on the side and we played every day. Now, we didn't have behind the net, so if you missed the net, you had to chase it. But we had sideboards. And so we had a built-in hockey rink as a kid. And every day, even by myself, I'd be out playing that in there. So, yeah, so I understand about that there. So now, so you want to talk a little bit about some of your other work that you've done as a writer, comedian, actor, co-creator?
Sure. Anything specifically? I mean, I've been I started comedy in the early 90s. I moved from my family at some point had moved from New York to Baltimore, which was kind of cool insofar as I wouldn't at that point have called myself an Orioles fan. But one thing I do remember really well in the 70s, the Orioles were great.
Yes, they were.
They were a phenomenal team in the 70s.
Was that Al Bunbury and guys like that?
That was, yeah. I mean, depending on where in the 70s you're talking about, if you're talking early 70s, you're talking Frank Robinson before he got traded to, or after he got traded from Cincinnati and he came to Baltimore. Boog Powell, you're talking about Don Buford. Then you get into guys like Bobby Grich, Mark Belanger, Brooks Robinson, of course. Jim Palmer, Mike Flanagan later on. They were Eddie Murray eventually. So many great players. And I remember still living in New York, and my dad taking us to a Yankees game, but not to see the Yankees really, because they were terrible in the early 70s. Their best. They had guys like Celerino Sanchez that to this day nobody can remember, or Horace Clark.
Horace Clark, that's the name I was thinking of. Yeah,
they were terrible. But my dad took us to see the Yankees play, but not because of the Yankees, because they were playing the Orioles, and the Orioles were like they were an all-star team. So when we came to Baltimore, I didn't lose my allegiance to the Mets, but I also embraced the Orioles as well. So I've always kind of gone back and forth. But anyway, so I moved to Chicago to study at Second City, which is like where Bill Murray did improv, and John Belushi came from there, and then found my way into stand-up and, started working the road. And, eventually I moved back to New York and out to LA, and I've been on the show Veep, which is the HBO show.
Which was Dreyfus.
Yeah. In fact, I've had a couple scenes with her. I play a reporter that shows up every once in a while, like the first 4 seasons. And then a long time ago, I was on the show Friends, which was kind of...
that.
What's that?
I vaguely remember that.
That show?
Yeah. It's how I met my wife, but...
And even my scene on Friends, now that I think about it, my scene on Friends was sports related, because I play a thief that goes to pretends that he's there to buy their entertainment unit or something, and Joey bets me that it's big enough that he can fit in it, and I kind of nod and go, yeah, no way. So he goes inside the entertainment unit. I run to the wall, grab his hockey stick, lock him into the entertainment center, and then rob their entire apartment. So I was in an episode of that. So, just been doing my thing. And then eventually...
you didn't play the smelly cat.
No. But actually, that was that episode is called The One with the Cat.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where I honestly never watched the show, like even to this day. It's actually kind of how my wife and I met, because she was a big fan of the show, and she's a lot younger than me. And when she first met me and she heard I was on Friends, like that was a little bit kind of my in, I guess, which was 13 years ago now. But
that'll do it. Yeah. No. When my
and it definitely wasn't my looks, because she's a lot better looking than me. But
when my now wife and I first moved in the same building, she would come down on Thursday nights at 8, to watch Friends, and that's how we became boyfriend girlfriend. Oh, wow. Yeah, so yeah, it's a small world.
That's amazing. Yeah. And then when I ended up back in Baltimore, I actually hosted a sports talk radio show first with my brother that was called The Fighting Ungers, and it was kind of like a sports comedy show.
His name is Felix, isn't it?
Yeah, Felix.
It was a really good show. And then I got hired, and I was actually the pregame host or the co-host of the 98 Rock. That's one of the stations that carried the Baltimore Ravens the year that they went to the Super Bowl.
The second time.
The second time, right, in 2011, 12.
Yeah, that was the year that they had the blackout at New Orleans.
Right. When it was Harbaugh against Harbaugh. It was the Ravens against the 49ers. What's funny about that is I hate the freaking Ravens. I hate them with an absolute passion because, first of all, they beat the Giants in 2000. So here I am. I'm the host of the morning of the pregame show, having to pretend I give a crap about a team that I would like to see go 0-16. And after every game, we would have press passes that, we're supposed to go to the game, watch the game, then go up to the press box. So one day I was up in the press box, and that season happens every 4 years, right? They happen to be playing the Giants in Baltimore.
Nice.
So I'm watching the game with the station manager, the head of the station, the guy who signs my checks. And he's sitting there, and we're watching the game, and the Ravens are kicking the crap out of the Giants. I mean, like they're school kids against men. And he's like, "Oh, look at that play! Look at Ray Lewis on that play!" And I'm just like going, "Yeah," and I'm trying to pretend, but I want to hang myself.
Right?
I have to pretend that I'm a Ravens fan.
That would be like me pretending to be nice to hand off to John Sterling or sit there with Gardner at a Bruins game. It
was probably my best acting job ever. I don't think I was ever a better actor than that day in the booth trying to make sure I kept my check.
Yeah.
We're actually looking for a new co-host on Digital to Dice, Mark. Don't know if you'd be available starting next week.
No, I'm on vacation the week after. You're fine next week. No,
you guys have such great chemistry. There should never be another co-host.
Like I said, I don't know if you heard some of the beginnings of the show, but like we just kind of started. Ron didn't even want to do it at first because he was doing something else, and we just and it's like, well, let's start it up, see how it goes. And the first show went well, the second show went well, and next we were checking, says we're getting 500 to 600 listens a week right now, and again, this is coming up on episode 93, and we had no idea how it would go over at all, but it's been received very well. People like yourself have emailed us, and
2 years in a month that we've been doing
coming up almost 2 years now.
Well, let me tell you how much I love the show. I'm actually sad that I'm on this week, because it means that I don't get that buzz of listening to the newest episode.
Yeah,
because I know the newest episode because I'm in it. And so I would like to go off now and have you do like another half an hour on your own. So I have a surprise that I can listen to. But no, I think, and I said this when I reached out to you guys, I really didn't know what to expect when I first tuned in. I saw, everyone's got a podcast, right? Let's face it. And some of them suck. I mean, a lot of them really kind of suck. They don't have – I'm not saying you should have or need to have a broadcast quality voice, but that can get kind of annoying, though, I think, when somebody is too, But you guys do both have a professionalism about the way you present the show, combined with a down-to-earth quality that I just found really compelling. And your passion for the hobby and the friendship that you've developed with each other kind of really shines through. And, I started watching when we were all looking around at the world going, what the hell? Are there zombies? Like, what? I have to wear a mask? What? We're all losing money. A lot of us anyway are losing money. And we're all looking for something to distract us. And you guys are extremely distracting. And I really took to that. And I think your topics are great. And I think, I really hope that you guys grow the show as much as you can, because
it's something I look forward to doing. And I think that, we talk about the show it's the old college thing. For every hour that you're supposed to be in the classroom, there's supposed to be 3 of homework. And I think that's pretty much what we do. We talk about the show
all week long. We talk about what we're going to do, what guests we're going to talk to this week, and how we're going to present it, or whatever. Yeah, and then sometimes even last minute we'll make a change because something will happen, whether in the world or whether in the community or whether a game we're playing or something in our personal lives. And it's like, hey, let's hold off on this. Let's talk about this right now because this is just happening to me in my game, or this happened to somebody in the community, and that's a better topic because it's fresh in our mind. So you have
to have that kind of flexibility. Absolutely, just like when you're doing sports talk radio, and I've also done political talk radio. You have to adapt to. You have to be somewhat fluid.
You're not setting the agenda. Absolutely. I wrote for Bleacher Report for a while, and then I did a year and a half at Fansided, including a wonderful stint covering the Nationals during Dusty Baker's second blow up in Game 5. A team that should have won the World Series and didn't, which is what Washington went through until they finally won a World Series.
Until they finally won it.
But and sometimes you're able to, build your own agenda for what you want to talk about, and sometimes it's like, oh God, the bullpen choked again, and so that's what and I found it easier when the topics were chosen for you. If you know that, look, you got Blake trying to blew another save. That's what you got to write about, and you can't be nasty about it or anything like that because your readers are going to be angry and nasty.
What disappoints me about sports writing, and maybe this has been going on a long time. Maybe it's just me being naive to sports writing, but like I listen to a lot of sports talk radio myself, and it seems like in the last 10 years, maybe 10 to 15 years, and maybe it's probably gone on longer, but I've only been aware of it like recently, 10 years, is that they seem to have the articles written before the game plays out. And that always bugged me because I always thought they would sit and watch the game like me, and then the sports writers would react to what happened. But now you hear them on the show, like they'll be on the radio, I'm like, yeah, well, I already had the article written for the game, and then I just had to change a couple things when I saw what happened in the game. I'm like, boy, that really, it takes all the.
Well, that's kind of one of those like inside. Knowing how you make the sausage is not a good thing.
Yeah.
So a sports writer probably shouldn't admit that he's pre-writing. Because what that's saying is that there's a template.
Yeah.
And essentially there is. Right. And so he's filling that in, and then as things change, he just has to do the bare minimum work. So yeah, that would bother me. That's peeking behind the curtain in a way that I wouldn't want to know about.
I'll give you 2 examples of that when I worked for BR. I covered my first paying job in sports media was the 2012 World Series, where that was the one that Sandoval took Verlander deep 3 times in Game 1. That made Pablo Sandoval a ton of money with the Boston Red Sox. In fact, it's still making Sandoval money with the Boston. I don't want to think about that. And so it was very obvious.
Actually, didn't he end up on the Orioles for a little while?
Yeah, after I think we're still paying him. Yeah. And so it became quite obvious early on in Game 4 or whatever the final game was that was it. Detroit was not coming back. And I had to have done within a half hour after the last pitch top 5 reasons why the Giants won the World Series, something like that. Why the Giants won and why the Tigers lost. And so you're not watching. You are not watching because it's over because you can hear it going on and you're familiar enough with the sport to know what's going on. Right. And so, yeah, I had that to my editors probably. I had to wait on the first slide, which would have been the last slide that I would have written, until the game was over and try to wait for the AP to get me a picture of the Giants celebrating on the field or whatever it was. But that article was done. I had it in my grammar editor and slides laid out as that game was ending. The other thing, and kind of like there's no Santa Claus type deal, the last paid assignment I did for one of the last assignments was the 2013 Masters, I think, the one that Adam Scott won from Australia. And so they paid me a lot of money to cover that. And again, as that's reaching for the playoff, and my editor has given me, I need 3 stories by midnight. And one of them was, I never saw the playoff. If I went back and watched the playoff, it'd all be new to me. But I had to write it assuming that Adam Scott won that playoff, which he did. So, yeah, Dave, you look inside a press center at a golf event, it is a tent. There are big screen TVs, but no one is actually on the course watching. They're watching the same way that you and I watch at home. They're just asking questions to whoever drops. So, Phil, why did you pull the driver out on 17 again? The same boilerplate questions. But no, when you're covering it's easier in a hockey game because you're there. But no, they're pretty much all written ahead of time.
Yeah.
You might get like a game that turns out the wrong way, and because you're up for the print, you're up against deadlines. You got a midnight deadline.
I suppose that makes sense too, because if you're saying I need something a half hour after the game's over, boy, to try to get creative within 10, 15 minutes and get it off to your editor, that's tough. But like I said, when these guys say, I had the article written and then the Bruins lost the game, so I had to go and rewrite the whole article. I was like, what do you mean you had the whole article written?
I think we're all proving our age right now, because the truth of the matter is,
morning deadline for the paper.
Guys now are tweeting as the game is in progress. So the idea that, we have to wait for them to write that brilliant story, like they're all supposed to be, Ring Lardner or Grantland Rice or something, those days are over, or even, Mike Lupica, in current times. Now it's all happening in real time, and everybody's just looking for hits and tweets and, social media presence. So the industry has changed so dramatically. I don't think anything, it'll never go back to the way it was.
Yeah, not with the internet now the way it is. The newspaper's kind of dying off, and like say waiting for the next day to get scores, or calling a phone number to get scores. Now that those days are over.
Yeah, those days are way over. But that's how we used to. That's how we used to do it.
976-1313.
I still don't love reading news or sports scores or anything on my phone or my computer. I still buy or try to buy a newspaper every day. Like there's a line in our show Thespian where my character is on the front steps reading a newspaper, and another character comes up to me and goes, they should put you in a museum, man reading newspaper. And then I say, well, Print's not dead until I am. And
I like that.
That's kind of how I feel personally, is we got to keep that alive. I try not to read on Kindle. I just sound like the oldest man in the world right now, but I don't care.
My
heart's healthy. I'm doing okay. I don't like to read on my phone. I rather read books, and I rather read newspapers.
I like both. There's times that I like to have the book in my hand. There's other times it's like I like to buy it and download it instantly and start reading that night if I'm really hot for something. So that's what that there. Hey, did you want to talk about this other project you were working on?
Yeah. So to some degree, maybe a large degree, inspired by watching you guys, or listening to you guys, and then watching the YouTube videos and learning more about both of you and Ron. Well, really both of you. I've started to kick around an idea about doing a documentary about this hobby that we all love so much. And because I've been in the business so long, I am a filmmaker. I've never done a documentary before, but I understand story. And whether you're writing a narrative piece or you're writing or putting together a documentary, you still need an arc. You need 3 acts. You need, plot points, things that move the story forward. So I've been thinking a lot lately about what would this documentary look like? Because I think the important thing is we could make a documentary that is only watched by the hobbyists, by the community, but that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is introduce the hobby to a wider audience and tell a bigger story. So, when you think about the pandemic and you think about where we all were in our lives before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and now as we're slowly coming out of the pandemic, and tying that to the cards and dice and computer sports gaming world, and how, you two are affected by it. I mentioned to you guys that in listening to your podcast, I could hear an emotional shift that's clear to me from when you first started and there was no pandemic, and then the early kind of rumblings of something's going on, but we don't know how long this is going to be. Maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's a month. And then as you're going on week by week with the show, if you don't mind me saying, Ron, you've always done your best, it seems, to be really kind of hopeful and optimistic, and which I find fascinating, just because to be that kind of a person is so the opposite of me. Like, as comics, we're like dark, cynical, angry little, that's just who we are.
Yeah, Robin Williams depression is real common in that field.
Yeah. And I mean, thankfully, I don't think I've ever sunk that low. Well, obviously.
No, but
yeah, comics are dark people, and we come from a dark place, and our prism tends to be dark. And you have this very hopeful kind of outlook. And then when I finally saw, and that you deal with
issues
that you've dealt with your whole life, and how you process that, I just find fascinating. And Dave, with you, it was you wore it in your voice. You could tell that you were really getting beaten down by the pandemic, and I don't know the particulars. I mean, you and I have talked a little bit, so I know a little bit more than maybe I knew just as a listener, but yet you still are playing your games, man, and getting excited by, your latest season that you picked up. And that was helping you get through it, but also helping us who are listening get through it,
Yeah, I was a workaholic with no work.
Right.
And that's alcoholic with no alcohol. That's what it was. Yeah. I worked many jobs, and I include this podcast as a job, even though I really don't get paid for it. It's a job to me.
Sure.
I had many different jobs that I do, from running my league to doing play-by-play to doing whatever, and they all went away. I mean, literally all went away for several months. So I'm a workaholic with no work, and now I'm home 24 hours a day. I would get up in the morning with nothing to do.
And on the other hand,
that was difficult.
My wife's in LNA. We're in subsidized housing. We were always going to have food. She worked the ultimate essential job. She worked in healthcare, for crying out loud. And so we didn't have those worries. We were worried about our friends, especially Dave. I mean, we all went through a very dark time together. But kind of two sides of the coin, where Dave wasn't sure when he's going to be able to work again. That wasn't something that we had to worry about. And there was, as with any disaster, there's survivor's guilt. And I think I felt that as Dave and I would go through, because no, we were never all okay through any of this, but it wasn't going to be the case of how are we going to eat?
Yeah.
So there was
one time that Ron actually, this is a little private, but he actually called my wife and said, check on Dave.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how low it got during last year. There was one point where he called my wife and said, you better go check on him, because he's home alone, and I didn't like his mood,
Yeah, it was rough.
And for me, my experience in terms of the financial hit was closer to Dave's.
Oh, I'm sure. How long were you at a production for?
A couple of different things happened. I mean, thankfully for us, my wife, who's a school teacher, she did keep working and was getting paid throughout this whole thing, because she was working from home.
Right.
So that helped, but that wasn't enough of an income stream to keep us really going.
Right.
For me, it was a combination of not being able to, find acting gigs because there were none. We had to stop production on Thespian. We were like 2 weekends away from finishing season 2.
Oh,
pandemic. And it's a crazy amount of work when you make a show the way we do it, which is kind of ultra low budget but really high production values.
Right.
Very small team of people. I'm the one doing the editing and color grading and all these other things that happen in post. So emotionally, that was draining me. And then my other source of income beyond, in writing, that's the one thing I could still actually make some money with. Mm-hmm. But I also co-own a comedy club called Magooby's Joke House, which is in right outside of Baltimore. My brother really runs it, but I kind of have a piece because I helped start it. And that shut down because of the pandemic. And so I lost a big chunk of income, and I was really hurting, Thankfully, things have gotten better. But getting back to the documentary, so I feel I'm still in that period where I'm still trying to get a handle on what the ultimate story will be. Obviously, you're going to talk about the history. So you'll talk about Stratomatic, and you'll talk about early versions of cards and dice games, and something that's just sort of interesting to people who are into history and into the history of sports games. But again, that's not story. So we interview Ron, and we interview you, Dave, and I actually I haven't interviewed him yet, but I spoke to Roberto Schiavini.
Tremendous story all the way around. But
he also happens to live in the greatest place on earth. Florence, Italy is the most unbelievable, beautiful place I've ever been, and my wife and I have ever been.
The best pineapple pizza in the world
is Florence. Yeah, they're known for that.
I quit.
It's actually two things. It's Michelangelo and pineapple pizza. That's the two things that Florence.
That's what I heard. Yep.
Okay, SpongeBob.
Yeah. In fact, Michelangelo, he invented pineapple pizza.
That's the rumor.
He did a big sculpture. Actually, if you look closely at the David statue, he's actually holding a pineapple pizza. But you only see it if you go to Florence. You never see it in the picture.
Right. They edited it out here in the States. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to reach out to listeners of this show and the community to hear your stories of how, if you'd like to be interviewed or pre-interviewed. I'd like to know how you got into gaming. I'd like to know where your life was prior to the pandemic, how the pandemic affected your life, personally, and also in terms of your gaming. A lot of us play these games solitaire.
Yes.
But not everybody.
No.
People do have gaming nights, and they interact, and they go to tournaments, and they have there's face-to-face leagues. There's a lot of face-to-face leagues, or there used to be. So all that was shut down. And I would imagine, this hobby tends to appeal to people middle-aged and up, right? Probably late 40s up.
Oh, I'm a baby.
Although I don't think
49.
I know you guys talk about that a lot. I'll bet if we really looked, we'd find that there's more young gamers, gamers like us, not video gamers than we realize. But still, primarily, I would agree that it skews older.
Yeah.
And, sometimes when you get hit with something that hard, we're not as malleable when we get older,
No,
and it's harder sometimes to go with the flow, and it's harder, to adapt, I think, for some people. So I'd like to reach out to the community and find out, how did you adapt? And then through this interview process, I'll start to put the story together and figure out what this is. I don't think you can talk about gaming and the pandemic without talking about some of the social chaos and political chaos that we've dealt with over the last, more than a year and a half, way more than a year and a half.
We went nightly for what, 6 weeks?
Yeah, we started, must have been, when I shut down St. Patrick's Day in March.
Mid-March, yeah.
Yeah, we started going every night because I had nothing to do. And every night, 6:30, 7 o'clock, we would come on and just...
On YouTube, it wasn't...
On YouTube, yeah, we were live on YouTube.
The podcast, it was something...
And it just was one of these things where we would come on and everybody else was like, hey, I'm listening on the way home from work, or I'm out of work listening. And we would have 50, 60, 70 people watching us. And now that's a lot to watch live. That was a lot for us at the time. And people were looking forward to us. If we wanted to take a night off, people were like, no, I need to get on here and chat.
We went, an hour and a half, 2 hours, pretty much 6 nights a week, 7 nights a week.
Yeah, for 6 or 8 weeks, I think we went into, because the weather was really bad.
Memorial Day, I think, is when
I remember it was a completely April was really rainy. So March and April were rainy and cold.
It was March 9th for weeks here.
And then when it finally got to mid-May is when the sun come out, and some of the things started to get lifted a little bit, and people could go out of their house a little bit. And so we scaled it down to once a week from there. But we went pretty steady. I want to say for 6 to 8 weeks, every night, hour and a half, 2 hours on YouTube. And it was a big deal to a lot of people. And there was nights that I didn't want to do it because I was so down. And Ron's like, I think we should. There's people counting on us, and we would get on there and be like, "Oh, I'm so glad you guys are on tonight." And
absolutely,
and that got us excited about doing it. It's like, okay, we need to do this now.
On top of the baseball replay I do on my channel was supposed to be 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon. And when spring training got shut down, right around then, and we weren't sure when there would be baseball, meaningful baseball again, I went daily through the rest of that season. And so what was supposed to be a 78, 80 game project that I do over the course of 6 months, I did 155 games, including playoffs and World Series. And so we went day after day. And so just to get people through the fix of having no baseball. Well, here you go. And thankfully it was 78. So it was people that my audience was familiar with, and we had some good races, and so I gave people baseball, and so still to this day, once in a while I'll see in the chat, I'm so glad that we went through this, not the whole pandemic or the election or anything like that, but as far as I'm so glad I had some place to turn to, every day. And
it's clearly grown the industry or grown the hobby, because I think one of you guys told me that like Strat had their best.
Strat by the end of this is according to them, by the end of last April had beaten their sales from 2019.
Right.
Yeah, the cards and dice industry had a very good year because people were home playing these games. Yep.
Because there wasn't anything to watch at night.
And the good thing was, too, is for us is because, especially for me, because I was home, I played a lot of games. I found the Roberto Schiavini games, which I wasn't really aware of. I found games like regular season basketball, and Marco, who's out in Italy as well. And so we played these games, and we kind of introduced them to new people. And next thing you know, Roberto's creating new seasons, and Marco's creating new seasons. And yeah, I'd like to think that we were kind of the catalyst and the spark for some of this stuff anyway. Shootout hockey.
I know that I definitely expanded my inventory of games that I own very much from listening to your podcast and hearing what you guys said about certain games, and then going out, taking a look at them and deciding, I need this. I'm not somebody like some of you guys are nuts. Some of you guys need to have like 10 different baseball games and 60 different seasons from every one of those games, and
don't look at me when you say that.
Not only Olympic wrestling, but you need Greco-Roman wrestling, or you're just not a happy camper.
Olympic wrestling, come on.
Oh, that's actually right. It is. And I don't think I go that crazy.
You said baseball, not hockey, Gardner. You're safe.
Oh, okay.
Dave, you've got like a sick amount of hockey games. It's a disease, man. It really is.
It's Fuzzy 222 from the Delphi boards, the tabletop sports gaming board, calls it MGD, multiple game disorder. And Gardner and I are, we're going to host a telethon to buy more games to feed our disorder.
Well, I'm also kind of like an audiophile, and I'm into like high res music, and I've got, I don't really have that much money in my life, but what money I do have pretty much all went into my stereo. Mm-hmm. So I've got like six different versions of like, Who's Next, the Who album. I've got like the CD, but also the CD mastered by this person and the high def version. So I get how you might need to have, you start hoarding. You need to have.
Well, I find that there's no perfect game, and that every game does something a little different, and every game is missing something that this game does. Like, for example, Apple Hockey. I love Apple Hockey, but it doesn't have the breakaways like Strat and Inside the Crease have, but it does block shots and have puck battles in the corner, which Strat doesn't have, you know what I mean? But Inside the Crease does. So everything does a little different. Now, shootout hockey, I can play it in 15 minutes, but it doesn't have what APA has. So I get a little bit out of everything. It's kind of like when you go out to dinner, you don't go to the same restaurant all the time. It's like, okay, today I want Chinese, today I want pineapple pizza, today I want roast beef, tomorrow I might want a hamburger. And so that's kind of how I look at it, because everything scratches a little different itch, and you have, I played a ton of this game. I want to go back to this game now because it's a little different. So that's kind of how I look at it, especially if it's your favorite game like hockey. I get just so many different experiences from the different games. It really, it's like a cornucopia. That's my big word for the day, cornucopia.
That's a good word.
There you go. There you go, Jacket.
My big thing is flow. Like, does a game really flow? Does it feel
that's Dave's big thing too.
Yeah.
And then also accuracy. I'm big. Like, I don't like games. There's a game that I play that there's things about it I really like in terms of the way it plays, and I don't want to. It doesn't matter what the game is, but I mean it's a game. It's a pretty well-known game, but I find that there's too many blowouts that is not statistically accurate, because I've checked to see if maybe I just don't understand, but no, it's too many. And it's the same company but a different game, way too many walks in their baseball game, like insane amounts of walks, and that will turn me off immediately. Like, it doesn't have to be exact. I mean, I realize that you're doing your best to be statistically, accurate.
We'll talk off air about that one.
I like a little fluctuation myself, because if you were to play, if you play a game and the standings come out exactly as they were in real life, it's like, why did I bother? So
I don't want to be reading Baseball Reference.
Yeah,
that sort of.
But
thing.
again, if you got a team, if the Yankees finished in last the year they won the World Series, that wouldn't be realistic either. So
right, that kind of thing, or if you've got, let's just, as an example, this is not my exact, this did not exactly happen to me, but let's say you have Greg Maddux and you look up and, certain part of the season, he's got, 30 walks and 12 strikeouts. Well, that game is seriously flawed.
Right?
Yeah. If you found something like that. So that's the kind of stuff that drives me crazy. I'm starting to like different games, and I do like, which I never knew about until you guys really, and getting kind of reinvested in the hobby. I didn't even know that there was a modding world out there until the last. I knew nothing about pictures or logos.
Such a scary community. It really
I play Diamond Mine Baseball now. I've probably played that game for over 20 years. Like, I remember when you had to call them, order seasons, and they would send you a floppy disk. Or not, right? And it would come in the mail.
It's a save icon on Windows Word, okay? It's a save icon. That's a floppy disk.
Yeah.
And, it's only in the last year that I found out that I can get photos and pictures of stadiums that I can use in Diamond Mine Baseball, or, whatever else it is, Replay, Action PC, all that
really
stuff.
enhances the game. I love that. I love seeing the logos in the stadiums or the rinks or the fields or whatever. It just makes it really feel like you're there. It really does.
Sure.
So
yeah, here's the experience.
Yeah. So when can we hear more about this the documentary here? So will you want to talk to some people in the community?
I guess,
ways to get a hold of you, things like that.
Right. Exactly. So I would say probably the best way to reach out to me is two ways. You can feel free to Facebook message me, Marc Unger. Just find me on Facebook, MarcUnger, or you can email me at markadamunger@gmail.com. And no, I'm not being pretentious with my middle name. It's the only way I could actually get. Somebody else has markunger.com, so I had to do markadamunger.com or markadamunger@gmail.com. And yeah, reach out, say, you heard about my documentary idea, you'd like to, talk more about it or be interviewed, and we'll kind of take it from there. If you'd like to watch the show Thespian, there's a couple ways you can do that right now. We are on Amazon. We used to be on Amazon Prime, where if you had Amazon Prime, you watched it for free. But they recently changed some things with their contracts. It's a long story that I don't want to get into, and not a positive reflection on Amazon. I'll just leave it there. But if you do want to watch it, it's like $1.99 an episode of both seasons, or you can buy the whole season for like $12. There's 2 seasons. The first show of season 1 is somewhat autobiographical. It's about a comic, longtime stand-up comic, who on his 50th birthday finds himself, who had a once promising career, who finds himself living across the street from the apartment he left 25 years earlier to start his career. Now, when that happens to you, you can either kill yourself, you can just kind of say, I'm done.
Or write the pilot for Everybody Hates Chris.
Or you could kind of hit reset. So the character decides that he's going to go back to his original passion, which is serious acting. So then the show, which is kind of a comedy drama, traces his journey over, so far 2 seasons. And it really gets into issues. It's not just about acting at all. It's about themes of family. It's about themes of aging. It's about, reflection on life and the choices that we make in life. It's about resiliency. People really love the show. If you read the reviews on Amazon, it's pretty impressive. We've won a bunch of awards and lots of nice press. So you can check it out on Amazon. Just type in Thespian, or you can watch the first season for free. It's on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So you can look for the Thespian series YouTube channel. And if you can't find it, just send me an email and I'll point you in the right direction.
Okay.
Good.
So anyway, so Marc, I want to thank you for joining us here on Digital to Dice. Great stories there about you and your dad and the games there and the games that you're playing and everything going on with your career now, and then the documentary that's kicking around here in the community here, because I think that's going to be obviously a big interest to everybody that listens to this show, because it's right up.
I think that'd be great. Yeah, so, I think it's a real opportunity to because every time I tell people who don't know about what we do and I explain to them, like, that's really cool. I mean, you can play the 1974 Red or 75 Reds against the 86 Mets. Yeah, I can do that right now. You know?
That's the one thing that video games don't do, and why I kind of left playing video games is you have to play the current season, and all the kids want to play that, and the young guys want to play. But the older guys like me, I want to play Roger Clemens, I want to play Louis Tiant, and that's who I grew up with, and I couldn't name 5 guys in the Red Sox today. It's just you get older, life gets in the way. It's like I want to go back to my time when I enjoyed sports, and that's what this hobby allows me to do.
There's about to be a whole generation of people who do daily fantasy that is going to be nostalgic for Tom Brady when he retires.
Sure, right.
It's going to be nostalgic for Steph Curry when he retires. Right. That may already be getting nostalgic for Kobe Bryant, because Kobe's not going to get that adult.
I've heard you say that before, Ron and Dave, and I think that's part of it. But remember, when we started playing games, like, we played current
players, right?
So I don't think it's completely fair to think that there aren't kids today who wouldn't want to play stat-based games.
I think there's some
of current seasons. I think there's a market for that too. I don't think we should discount kids completely and think they all want to live in a video world. Just like me and you guys taking pen and paper with 2 dice and figuring out stats.
Sure.
Like when I played dice baseball, I used to make up teams of superheroes. So like Flash was a shortstop, Batman was the right fielder. I had Marvel against DC, and I would just roll the dice, and there's lots of kids today. I mean, look, kids are huge, way more now than when we were younger. Like, I grew up when Dungeons and Dragons role playing games was just coming up, and I was a big D&D guy. Mm-hmm. Today, role-playing games are
they are through the roof.
Huge.
Through the roof.
And all of those kids, if they're into sports as well, would want to play these games if they knew about these games.
Right.
Because Dungeons and Dragons is still going strong.
Stronger than ever.
At its roots, it's still pen and paper.
And it's grandfathers and fathers and sons.
Right.
Or uncles
and sons and all their friends.
Right, exactly. So hopefully that's the case. But I know that there's, I know we're trying to wrap up. I have brothers-in-law who are huge football fans and do the daily fantasy, and they're in their 30s and 40s, and so their first generation of heroes have retired from when they were kids, but they get involved into, because it's so different today. I root for teams. I don't necessarily root for players. I root for teams. I root for laundry. And, I think they'll be extra nostalgic for whoever it was that got them the fantasy football championship. I want to be able to, Jamarcus Russell or whatever. I think that's the market that needs to be, they could do a better job in tapping those who are with disposable incomes. Because let's face it, Dave and I were looking at a season of APA baseball cards. What was it, 120?
The football is $110.
I think the baseball is pretty close.
Baseball is like
too.
60 or 70, I think, maybe 80.
No, the chip
is the retail price, or is that like the aftermarket price?
No, that is if you go to the APA website and buy an 80 season with less players, the minimum was from $78 to $84, and that's
wow, that gets into some serious coin.
And so so you're gonna sit there and go, what you're talking about earlier, the Street and Smith, and us looking for that. It's kind of hard to ask mom and dad to sit there and pony up $100 to get into that. Hopefully, I'm sure some do, but I think there's an untapped market of those people like Dave who came over from video games and earned it. That's I'm not doubting what you're saying at all, but I think that's the market that these companies.
It is $19.75 is $78 on APA. If that's what
would be 2020?
All right, so if I were to call up $78. So the game's $30, 78 for a season. That is still kind of pricey though. $78 for if you're just getting into the hobby. $78 is a little expensive there. You got to really, really enjoy what you're doing there, And again, it's something that you don't have to buy them all at once. You chip away here, chip away there, whatever. But so I could see how that would be put up. But I think once you get into it and you realize but look at Dungeons and Dragons. If people still play those games, or even the board games now, there's board games. I belong to a couple communities, and these things are spread out. I mean, the table size is huge in these games, and these games sell for like $100, and the expansions are $40 or $50.
I know people who spend $100 on Pokemon cards or Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments or Magic the Gathering, especially $200-$300 a box at the drop of a hat. Some of these people, you see these YouTube videos, and they'll be reviewing games, and they'll have these racks behind them of these games, and that they're $50 to $100, $150 games at a whack.
Oh, yeah.
And so I feel bad about spending, $40, $50, $60 on a season of Apple hockey or, whatever, payoff pitch or whatever it is. And then you see these people like, well, I don't feel so bad because they got they must have 100 games behind them that are somewhere between $50 and $100 each.
Yeah.
So, but if that's your hobby and you enjoy that,
the people who are playing these board games are, they're young. They're young people, a lot of them.
Yeah.
So they'll spend the money if they enjoy the game.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
All right, Ron. Any final words?
I'm good.
No, that was a fun one there. I got a chance to talk to Marc about his upcoming documentary, some things he's been working on here, and this is history of game playing here. It's always nice to talk to someone and find out. Like I say, it's Father's Day coming up, so we had a little Father's Day story here. You playing with your dad and stuff, and that must have been fun. Just sitting there and hey, here's a game and rolling the dice like, wow, what is this? And just that kind of planted the seed of some of the games there. So anyway, Marc Unger, hey, thanks for coming on Digital to Dice.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So by the numbers, episode 93, that was a fantastic interview with Marc Unger. It was fun just kind of chatting with him, too, about a few things, you never know how these things are going to go, and we just went off on it. But, a good story of specifically how a father, most of us have a male influence that got us into sports. And I'm glad that he had those wonderful memories of his father and going through the box scores the next morning and then playing as whoever the Mets played for that. And at that age, when you're talking 5 or 6, 7 years old, you're not expecting your team to win championships or all that. It's just the whole thrill of winning the sports. I thought the funniest thing was when the dad would say, okay, who's going to win the horse race? And his dad would bet. And he would just say, number 3, number 5, and number 2. And his dad's like, oh, I can just picture that. Yeah. Just betting on the races, and he's just picking them off the top of his head. That's a funny little story, too. So, hey, thanks to Marc for coming on. Absolutely. And talking with us here on the show. Again, ways to get a hold of us, digitaltodice.com is the website, 978-751-DICE, 978-751-3423 is how you can text us, digitaltodice.com at yahoo.com, and facebook.com/groups/digitaltodice if you'd like to join the conversation over on Facebook. All right, Ron, 93 episodes in the bank.
Amazing, isn't it?
It is. We're coming up on 2 years here. We're coming up on episode 100. Wow.
In about 2 years and about a month, and then what do we figure? Mid-August for episode 100?
Yeah, because we got what, six or seven more to go. We might make it to triple digits. So, anyway,
we're going to turn into pumpkins well before then, I think.
We might. Hey, so I'm Dave.
I'm Ron.
Talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.